Hey folks, MasakoX here. So as you may probably know, I am very much a person who likes to make fan stories of Dragon Ball. I also looked at some years ago in their own videos, one and dones, a brief summary for you all to look into at your leisure. However, I sort of fell off from doing that, but here is where I've come back after seeing this pique a lot of people's interest. Dragon Ball Kakumei. I thought that it might be quite cool to look at this story as it develops from the beginning, wondering whether this might fall into the typical fan tropes of being super edgy and super gritty, something that is far too common, sadly, in this fandom, that it's not even funny. Not every story has to have it where your main character's back is basically reduced to its muscly sinew, and if you're new to this review series, that happened already. In the last chapter, we were dealing with the aftermath of Kansei, the mother of all angels, and her angelic goons and children being frozen in time by the GP, but only this time for 2 years. In this time, everybody in the multiverse from all 12 universes, well, technically 18 now, would have to pick a side, begin their training for the ultimate showdown of ultimate destiny. Everyone would be against everyone else. Now for the first couple of chapters, it looked like Kakumei would indeed fall into the similar pitfalls of fan manga, but Chapter 3 did show us that it could have a more light-hearted side to it, with Bulma stealing the show a lot of the time. And the fact across multiple characters, the revelation that Goku was locked inside the GP's temporal ice age, just left me laughing so much. Just for the fact that characters were like, oh no, we literally have to wait for Goku! What do we do? Their panicked expressions just made me feel ecstatic with hilarity. It just brings to light their over-reliance on the guy. And as that's been going on, Gohan has been taking center stage, taking the charge, and he's taken himself to Universe 11 to train with Jiren and Dispo, as well as be introduced to the new GOD of Universe 11, Toppo. After Belmont, retired, which also means burnt to a crisp. Let's move on, shall we? Now already from the cover of this chapter, you can tell this is mostly about Vegeta and Caulifla getting all nettled at the mere sight of him. Already I can see this being the most downloaded of all chapters because it's going to have a lot of Caulifla in it, and trust me, it does. Jaded? Cynical am I? Perhaps. But I know my Dragon Ball, and how much the dames are desired and the click-through rate goes through the roof even if you just add them to the cover. But yeah, you gotta admit she's looking pretty jacked here. They draw her well. Perhaps she did Arm Day here with Tenshinhan or something. Either way, the prince here is looking smug, going, "Ah yes, ain't I a little stinker? Me and my noble legacy." Caulifla isn't happy with the fact that her entire mobster gang got beaten down by Cabba's idol in the previous chapter, which I found pretty hilarious. And Vegeta, much like any other alien going, basically goes, "Take me to your leader," which Caulifla finds to be quite, well, I don't know what that expression is, but I can tell the artists here do enjoy making Caulifla contort her face into weird and surreal positions. She could do with some phallosin, right? So whilst the loud one is screaming her head off, Vegeta goes to Kale for some straight talk, but she isn't sure whether to comply or not, having lost her confidence from the Tournament of Power, which is a little weird to see. But all of this gives Caulifla the window to attack again, Vegeta this time, and immediately gets smashed in the face by Vegeta's boot in Super Saiyan, as if it were nothing. And yeah, the aftermath is her rolling around in the dirt, little bit of blood. It's a little extreme, but okay, if you couldn't tell, this isn't gonna be your Shueisha fare here, kiddos. The people here that make Kakumei are not afraid of showing exposed muscle. And I'm not talking about taking any shirts off. Again, Dragon Ball Fan Manga, you gotta throw some darkness into the mix here, it's the law. Speaking of darkness, we cut to Planet Pillar, where Hit is busy finding Frost, who is currently bugging out, since there are giant bugs around to hang out with and hide behind. Frost thinks he's got some space between he and Hit, but he doesn't know what Hit's MO is, because he uses his time skip ability to get right up to him, and repeat basically what had happened before the tournament. But actually, it's the other way around. Frost was hired to track Hit, but failed miserably because Hit found him, just like at everything else in life he's failed at. Who was his client? Himself. His own bitterness. We then cut back to Sadala, and Vegeta is about to meet the king, and woo! That's a something. One thing you cannot fault Kakumei here are its double page spreads. They're gorgeous. And Vegeta too is very pleased with the presentation of the Saiyan King's palace, as Sprouts, a pilot, takes them down into the depths, thinking that Vegeta's a bit of a jokester, whilst then Caulifla awakens and is once again angry despite the fact that she got put in a timeout by the guy just now. I'm not really sure about this Caulifla. I don't think she would be this enraged all the time. Sure, she'd be angry once or twice, like earlier, but still. Really? After she got beat up again? Doesn't seem right. She'd probably be quite quiet right now if this were the real deal, stewing to herself about when to have round 2. Not be angry all the time. Even if her goons had been downed, it's just a little one note in my opinion. And anyway, as they're bickering, the onlookers can hear everything from outside and they're just sad, believing Vegeta to be a joke, a jester. Well, I mean, if you'd seen Vegeta in the Cell Saga, you wouldn't be entirely wrong. And then we present to you the Saiyan King. Whoa! Woo! That's an awesome design! That's way more elegant than King Vegeta. I'd bow down to this guy any day. He's got the wild expression, the cool robes, and the symbol insignia. Ooh, this is a classic fantasy design. I'm living for it. And by the way, note in the corner that Caulifla is all tied up now. Yeah, good call, Cabba. This version seems a little bit unpredictable. But after a couple of stare downs between Prince and Ruler, typical Saiyan custom, the mood calms down a bit and he introduces himself as King Sadala. Makes sense. And Vegeta is just Vegeta. Ah yes, of course, that's fair enough because he's a prince of no one and all that. King Sadala tries to talk about his story, but Vegeta doesn't want to know. But because of Sadala's aura and imposing figure, the prince does capitulate and humours the king. Well yeah, Vegeta, we want to hear the story. It turns out that the two Saiyan tribes weren't all that different a while ago, Universe 6 and 7, with Sadala himself being a very powerful warrior in his day. Their peaceful life apparently being relatively recent instead of for eons. I mean, it kinda makes sense after what we saw in the last chapter with those thugs and all that. The previous king had had enough though, and diverged Universe 6 and 7 Saiyans from one another by successfully brokering peace between all Saiyans. Through serving the king and only the king, the current King Sadala survived the many wars until Gherkin the Bloody was the last thing to get in their way. He wanted one last crack at the throne. But our Sadala killed him, but found this act to be rather hollow actually. Hence why this palace now has a tribute to that moment. It's a deep and long pit into the abyss, to reflect the hollowness of his ultimate act of revenge, and now having no threat to conquer and no wars, kinda leaves some Saiyans empty. Well, that's deep. Looks like his palace. However, despite this cool story, Sadala is ultimately not interested in helping Vegeta, and he is about to leave before Vegeta starts calling him a chicken for having gotten this far, and now not wanting to risk everything for an outsider, playing it cool. But instead of doing what he would normally do in the past Vegeta, which is to suddenly go in for the kill and kill the obstacle, you see some flashbacks to Saiyan Saga Vegeta and Cell Saga Vegeta, Vegeta instead gets down on his knee and nobly implores with the monarch to help, which even catches Caulifla off guard. Well, I mean, that is saying something, with the added caveat of Vegeta calling the king who doesn't keep promises to be no better than one who doesn't follow his own beliefs, something that Sadala had said earlier. Touché. Meanwhile, Frost and Hit are busy talking one-sidedly, with Hit ignoring Frost until the point where Frost suggests he may be unhappy with his life and job Hit, which does get Hit to respond with a resounding, "Damn, Daniel." That face says it all. We then cut to a new location for this chapter, with Jarko saying their trip with the Vampa residents will take 2 more days, but supplies are running low and Jarko is being typically selfish, to which Broly is being a good boy, offering some bug legs to Bulma for nourishment, with the OK sign as well. Aw, that's sweet. Shows he's learning. But who isn't learning here is King Sadala, who didn't take too kindly to Vegeta's words, but the prince is not budging, saying that delaying the inevitable of the multiversal war will walk over any pacifist going. Oh yeah, why does that sound oddly familiar? Did I play a character in a parody who was once one of those pacifists? Maybe. King Sadala throws an almighty and regal temper tantrum, before then telling the special forces to be gathered for training with the prince. Basically, he agreed to it without saying that he would agree to it. Either way, the sight of the entire Sadalan army in another glorious double-page spread shows us that the chapter has ended. All in all, this chapter was quite the eye-opener, and one I think will be welcomed by most Dragon Ball fans, since it scratches the overwhelming itch of many, to see Sadala and for Vegeta to be there, doing what he does best, rubbing people up the wrong way. In this, we are seeing a lot of it, and the design of the palace and King Sadala are incredible. I noted at the end that the creators were agonizing over the king's design. They say so in their post-chapter notes. But that amount of patience and assurance to make it look good was worth it, you three. This turned out to be rather imposing and something worthy of a Saiyan king. You could have gone with a copy-paste job of King Vegeta, but you didn't. You made something truly cool, and for that, I do commend you. And when it comes to the king's demeanour, I would say it makes logical sense. After spending most of his life as a warrior, and having succeeded in bringing peace and stability to the planet for his own king's behalf, then finishing off their greatest threat, it left him feeling empty. Despite clamouring for quiet times and no more wars, it turned out that they couldn't live without them Saiyans. Without them, a typical Saiyan isn't the same. Things get dull, comfy, samey, and in the end, Sadala became naturally paranoid and didn't want the status quo to change. That's what happens to very timid and soft Saiyans. And Vegeta told him that was something he couldn't do anymore. He couldn't ignore it. So, Sadala ultimately bowed down to the Universe 7 Saiyan because he was right. As for their heritage, it was interesting to see that the Saiyans started off the same, and only recently became more peaceful and helpful towards other worlds in comparison to Universe 7. Unlike what the original has implied, where there was a major evolutionary divergence many centuries ago, which results in Universe 6 Saiyans not having tails anymore, which resulted in considerable separation between the two. Here though, it's just one change in environs and personnel, and it led to a benevolent Saiyan kingdom. Whilst it's less big in scope, it's something that does make sense. The major bugbear for me here was Caulifla. Despite her artistry being excellent, and you cannot say that she lacks emotion and passion, it's just, she's too angry in this story. During the Tournament of Power, she had garnered a more relaxed nature, and while she's still feisty after the contest, there's no denying that, she's still more chill and content with her partner in crime, Kale. And talking of Kale, that's even worse. Here she was very absent despite her gaining newfound confidence in the original main timeline, finding her true calling and power which was unique to her. It bolstered her up to no end. But here, I don't know. It felt to me as if both their character growths had never happened. And that made me feel a little sad, to be honest. I don't know, maybe we need more time to see this unfold, to really show what they can do, but right now, that was a little disappointing. When it comes to the pacing of the overall story though, it seems like it's truly calmed down after the rocket pace of the first 2 chapters. We know the premise, we know the overall direction, so now we can slow down a little bit to focus on specific things. How the Dragon team is going to help and work with other universes and fighters to try and bring as many people onto their side as possible. I think this is fair. We don't want to rush the story too much, otherwise it'll be over and done relatively quickly despite the initial and intriguing premise. One last thing I need to say about, and something I quite like, is the dynamic between Frost and Hit. I think this could lead to them becoming, if not friends, then being able to tolerate each other, work together in a way. It seems that Frost, after the contest, has gained some sort of respect toward Hit, and wants to learn how to be like him in some way. Yeah, I could get this. Frost is a con artist, and he now wants to try and learn how to own what he is, and what he has, and the best way to do it is to learn some techniques from the best assassin in Universe 6, the best con artist. But due to his slimy nature, he comes across instead as an irritating fanboy. It all works, and ultimately, will this lead to Hit folding? Well, considering he's over 1,000 years old, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but we shall see. But what did you folks think? Did you find the trip to Sadala enjoyable? Is the story something of which you're still behind, or is it getting a little bit too slow for you? Leave a comment below, and let's get this discussion going. And I will see you in the next video. Catch you later!